All right, welcome to the part 2 of Beauty and the Beast. This is a pretty long story, that's why I thought I'd break it into two parts. So the setting at first, remember, it was at their house. He lost all his money, and now he went to the beautiful palace. He went to pick the rose. And now the Beast is very upset that he's stealing the rose, and he says, I prepared to die. You will pay for it with your life. Let's find out what happens next. I beg you, pleaded Mr. Fortune in horror, barely able to control his voice. Forgive me, please. It was an innocent mistake. My daughter wanted a rose. It is for her. I meant no harm. You have been so kind, my lord. Do not call me lord, roared the creature. Do not try to flatter me with pretty words. I do not like it. We should say what we mean and be what we are. I am a beast. My name is Beast. You will call me Beast. Beast by nature, beast by name. Beast, beast, beast. He shuddered as if trying to control himself, and then he pointed at the cowering Mr. Fortune. You say you have a daughter? Yes, my beast, stammered the desperate man. 3, I can show you their pictures. Don't, spat the beast. Pictures mean nothing. I want your life, but I will take your daughter instead. Then you may live, but she must come of her own free will. I give you 1 day. Go now and bring her, or return alone and die. Swear to do this, or I will kill you at once. I swear on my life, answered Mr. Fortune hastily, thinking this way at least he would have the chance to say farewell to his beloved daughters before returning to meet his fate. Then go, said the beast, turning away. There are some gifts with your horse. I would not leave your daughters empty-handed. As the beast lumbered slowly off, Mr. Fortune ran as fast as he could for the stables, desperate to get away. His horse was waiting for him with a brand new saddle and harness, and on its back was strapped a great trunk full of more fine dresses and jewelry than his daughters could ever have imagined. But no riches could comfort Mr. Fortune as the horse carried him home, for the beast had broken his heart. It was Beauty who saw him first, a small, dark smudge in the road, in the broad white landscape. He's coming, she called. He's here. At once Hermione and Gertrude ran out ahead of her, desperate for their presence, screaming with delight at the sight of Mr. Fortune's handsome new suit, too excited to notice the tears running down his cheeks. They threw open the lid of the magnificent trunk, and oh, what joy, what precious things, what ecstasy of wealth was theirs. But as Mr. Fortune gave Beauty her rose, his voice was cracked with grief. My darling Beauty, he said, your present has cost me more than any treasure. And then outpoured the whole story of his ordeal. They listened in horror, scarcely able to believe that such a monster could exist. Perhaps poverty and their father's disappointment in the city had simply driven him mad. But gradually Mr. Fortune convinced them that he was speaking the absolute truth. Then horror gave way to anger, and anger quickly turned to blame. Beauty's sisters glared at her. You always have to be different, don't you? Hermione said bitterly. Why couldn't you ask for something normal? Bring me a rose, Papa, bring me a rose, mocked Gertrude. You think you're so special, and now you've ruined everything. But Beauty didn't say anything. She hardly even heard their words. It is no one's fault but mine, she was thinking. Her beloved father was in terrible trouble, all because of her. He will not die, she thought. The rose is mine. I will go. I will gladly go. And then, as if she were awakening from a deep sleep, she suddenly spoke out. Father, she said, don't be sad. You picked the rose for me, and I will go to this beast. They all looked at her in astonishment. No, Beauty, said her father. Yes, Father, she said with a firmness that surprised everyone, even herself. I know what I must do, and my mind is made up. However much they argued, late into the night, there was no changing Beauty's mind. Even if her father tried to set off alone, she said she would follow him. By the time they fell asleep, too tired to talk anymore, it was settled. Beauty would meet the Beast. It was early the next morning and still dark when Beauty and her father left home. They rode all day, huddled together for warmth, through snow-capped fields and icy forests, until night fell and the magnificent palace appeared before them. In the stables there was fresh hay again. Then Mr. Fortune led Beauty to the vast hall where the candles shone like fireflies, and the logs blazed in the hearth, and the great table this time was set for two. They picked at the food in happy, nervous silence. Mr. Fortune was too sad to speak, and Beauty, though she wanted to be brave, felt horribly frightened, knowing that soon the Beast would come. She did not have long to wait. She felt it at first, like a cold darkness in the room. Something was watching. And then she gasped as the monstrous creature emerged, towering high above them, its claws dragging across the floor with a screech that set her teeth on edge and its sour smell catching in her nose. It was unspeakably ugly, and it spoke, or rather growled in a voice so hoarse it hurt her to listen. Did you choose to come here of your own free will?" the Beast asked. Beauty could hardly speak for trembling, but she managed to nod her head. "Then you're welcome," said the Beast. It breathed in deeply, as if it would say more to her, but instead it turned abruptly to Mr. Fortune. "Your daughter's love has saved your life. Say goodbye before you sleep. You will leave before she wakes." There was a silence. The sound had gone. The smell had gone. The Beast had gone. Beauty stared after him. How strange, she thought. He could not look at me. It made no sense, but at least she was alive and hadn't fainted with fear. "It might be all right," she whispered to her weeping father. "It will be all right." And they fell asleep where they sat, worn out with tension and grief. When Beauty raised her head from the table the next morning, she knew she was on her own. She sat absolutely still for a moment, her heart quaking as she thought of the monster who held her prisoner. "He will not break my spirit," she vowed. "I will not show him any fear, only that I despise him for his cruelty and loathe him for his ugliness." And having made this brave decision, Beauty stood and made her way upstairs to find a room in which she might unpack her small case from home. She felt dwarfed by the enormous staircase, and at the top by the echoing vastness of the great passageway that led off in each direction as far as the eye could see. As she hesitated, unsure which way to turn, she saw a door straight in front of her on which, as if in glowing magic hand, were written the words, "Beauty's Room." "So this is my prison cell," thought Beauty gloomily, turning the handle, stepping into a room that was so unlike anything she had imagined that she thought she must be dreaming. It was not a cell at all, not dark or dank or tiny or cold. There were no heavy manacles hanging from the walls or iron bars across filthy windows. It was instead quite the most astonishing, luxurious room Beauty had ever seen, or rather series of rooms, for each led into another, all as splendid as the last. The gorgeous bedroom with its vast plump bed led to the dressing room, where tall wardrobes were filled with marvelous outfits, all a perfect fit. There was a huge warm bathroom with scented oils of every color, and a bright sitting room with enough soft sofas and rugs for every day of the year. In the music room waited an entire orchestra of harpsichords and violins and cellos and flutes and oboes, all humming quietly in tune as Beauty entered, as if to say, "Welcome, let's play." And a great dance floor stretched invitingly across the room. A great library was stacked floor to ceiling with every book she had ever heard of, and many more she hadn't. Beauty gazed around in delight and gasped, and put her hand to her mouth and said, "Oh, wow." For it suddenly occurred to her that the Beast would never have gone to so much trouble if he meant to kill her, at least not immediately, and so she might as well enjoy it while it lasted. "My only wish," she thought, "is that I could see my beloved father and my dear sisters, and Immediately there appeared a mirror on the wall, in which, to her astonishment, she saw Mr. Fortune safely back home while Hermione and Gertrude paraded before him in their new finery. "Thank you, Beast," said Beauty to herself. "You are kinder than you look." By the time Beauty had finished exploring and delighting in every marvelous detail, it was growing dark. At once candles flickered into light, and by their warm glow she treated herself to a luxurious foamy bath. Then she selected a perfect exquisite dress from the wardrobe and went downstairs to supper. The great hall looked magnificent in the candlelight, and a delicious meal was laid out on the table. But as Beauty took her seat, the clock chimed 9, and there came the terrible dragging sound of the Beast's approach, and she felt sick with a fear that she struggled not to show as he appeared. For a moment there was silence while Beauty prayed he would not harm her, and then the Beast spoke in a slow, rasping voice. "Beauty," he said, "may I join you?" Beauty's head spun, and for a moment she thought she would faint. What did he want? What was she meant to say? Then she summoned all her courage, looked straight at him, heavens, he was ugly, and answered as calmly as she could. "I'm sure you'll do whatever you want," she said, surprising herself with her boldness and immediately worrying that she might have made him angry. "No," he answered shortly, as if trying to control himself. "Everything here is for your pleasure alone. I will leave you if you wish." Beauty was amazed. Could he mean it? But before she could answer, he went on, his face twisted away from hers. "I hope you like your rooms. I can tell you find me too ugly to bear in any case." No, stammered Beauty, not wanting to lie or offend, for he seemed almost to be in pain. "That is, you seem very kind, and your palace is lovely, but it is true that you are—" "I am hideous," said the Beast angrily, rising to his feet as if he could not bear to be with her any longer. "Perhaps," said Beauty. She was shocked by the bitterness in his voice and groped for some words of comfort. "But looks aren't everything, Anne." "Aren't they?" he snapped, and suddenly the atmosphere was very different. Threatening, uncertain, dangerous. Beauty shrank back, the hairs rising in her neck as the Beast leaned toward her. She could see him with awful clarity now. He was so close, the great strong teeth, the huge nose, the pitiless eyes in which she saw herself reflected like a tiny flower floating on a deep black pond. As she gazed in fear, she heard the Beast speak. "Then will you marry me?" Beauty stared in horror, barely able to make sense of the words. "No," she shrieked. "No, leave me alone, no." In the Beast's eyes, she saw her reflection shimmer as the black pond brimmed with tears, and then the Beast turned away with a sigh that echoed around the great hall and up the stairs until it filled the whole palace sorrow. "Farewell, Beauty," said the Beast as he left her. And Beauty's dreams at night were full of this strange, sad monster who seemed so hateful and yet so full of hurt, so eager to please and so easy to pain. And here she is dreaming about him, and he's going away sad. Poor Beast. The next day and the days after were as full of wonder and surprise for Beauty as her first. Her rooms never ceased to delight and amaze her, and there always seemed to be another one to discover. There were rooms for the day and rooms for the night, rooms for every whim or pleasure. There was the sewing room in which she practiced embroidery and made fine tapestry. All the needles were threaded themselves for her convenience, and no pin ever pricked her thumb. There was the aviary filled with birds that sang the mysterious songs of the sky as they built their elaborate nests, and where she made friends with the splendid parrot who perched on her shoulder. There was the monkey room, where she laughed until she wept at the antics of the chimpanzees, and the hammock room, and the painting room, and the extraordinary window room that every day had a different view of the gardens, no matter how often she visited. Wow, this is really some setting, don't you think? Then there were the gardens themselves, which looked even more astonishing now that the snow had all melted away and their full glory could be seen blossoming in the warm sunshine. Beauty would ride or walk for hours, or on lazy afternoons lie back in a boat while the winding river carried her along, past meadows and orchards, pagodas, pavilions, and knot gardens. There are fountains to splash in and waterfalls to sit beneath, mazes to explore, trees to climb, and the stunning colors of a million flowers to dazzle the eye. Everywhere, proud, strutting peacocks spread their magnificent tails, chattering excitedly among themselves at Beauty's approach, and shy young deer learned to nuzzle her curiously with their warm, wet noses as the days passed into weeks and the weeks into months, and they lost their fear of the stranger in their midst. Nor was Beauty afraid any more. She knew the Beast would not hurt her. He was never anything but courteous and kind, and concerned only for her happiness. She had even grown used to his looks, his thick mane of hair, his long clawed fingers, this strangely shy way he walked. They never met by day, but each evening as the clock struck and asked if he might join her at her meal. Far from dreading his visits, Beauty felt looking forward to them with pleasure, for he was good company. She had grown to like him more than she had ever imagined possible. There was only one problem. Every evening, without fail, the Beast would ask her the same terrible question. "Will you marry me?" It was the one thing Beauty dreaded above all. She knew she must say no, and she knew how much it hurt him as he turned away always with that heart-rending sigh. But still he would ask her again the next night, and the night after, like a starving man tortured himself with dreams of food. After 3 months, Beauty could bear it no longer. "Beast," she said that evening, "please don't ask me again. It upsets me so much to cause you pain, but I can never love you. I treasure you as a dear, kind friend. Please be happy with that, and do not spoil it by wanting more." The Beast was silent for a time, his head bowed. "I would not hurt you for any price," he said at last. "Forgive me." He raised his eyes to Beauty, and for a moment she feared that she had wounded him beyond repair, so broken and hopeless did he seem. But then he seemed to find courage, and somehow she knew what he would say even before he spoke. "I will not ask you again, I promise. Your company is greater blessing than I ever hoped for. I ask only one thing of you. If you are happy to be my friend, please promise that you will never leave me alone." Beauty was deeply touched and would willingly have granted his request, but she could not. That very evening, she had seen in the magic mirror that her father was desperately ill with worry about her, and she longed to go home and nurse him. "I cannot be happy here," she explained, "while my father is sick. My heart aches for him." "And my heart aches for you," said the Beast at once. "But if I send you to your father, you will surely stay there, and then your poor Beast will die of grief." He looked so sad sitting there. She reached forward and touched his paw where it lay heavy on the table. "Dear Beast," she said. It was the first time she had ever felt the rough, coarse fur, and she was amazed to see how pale and delicate her hand looked against it. "I will not stay there," she softly. "I promise to come back. I only want to make sure that my father's all right and to show him that I am well and happy. 1 week. Then I will return." Gently she stroked his paw, then carefully removed her hand, for the Beast was trembling in a kind of torment and twisting his head from side to side. When at last he stilled himself, his words were so quiet that Beauty had to lean forward to hear. "You will be there tomorrow when you wake," he said in a flat, exhausted tone. There was no hope or happiness in it. She knew only that he had made a decision beyond her understanding, and that it had cost him dearly. Then he reached out toward her. "Keep this ring safe," he said, handing her a simple gold band. "Place it on your pillow when you wish to return, but I beg you not to forget your promise. 1 week." And then, before she could say anything, the Beast walked away, with a sigh more sad and weary than any she had ever heard him utter, pausing only for one long last look at Beauty before he disappeared. Beauty cried herself to sleep that night, for it was awful to be so fond of the Beast and to cause him such pain. But when she awoke the next morning, all thoughts of sadness disappeared at once. She was, to her sheer delight and wonder, in her old bed at home, and the sun shining in the window, and outside the fields stretching into the distance, rich with crops ready for harvest. Beauty ran downstairs to the parlor, and there was Mr. Fortune, scarcely able to believe his eyes at the sight of his beloved daughter. They hugged, laughing and weeping, and the tears seemed to wash the lines of worry and age from old Mr. Fortune's face, until his cheeks glistened with a happiness that Beauty could scarcely remember. Eventually, Hermione and Gertrude appeared as well. They had been woken by the noise of Beauty and her father dancing for joy, and both of them were in extremely bad temper. "Be quiet, can't you?" snapped Hermione. "Some of us are trying to sleep," added Gertrude, before they both stared at Beauty and said disgustedly, "What are you doing here?" Their moods were not improved when Beauty told them. In fact, they were furious. It was just so unfair. Here they were, stuck in the country, living the most tedious life imaginable with a dull old father who spent all his time sick with worry, while their horrid little sister, who deserved to die for her stupidity, was luxuriating in a magical palace waited on hand and foot, with no end of riches and entertainments to amuse her. Oh, they hated her, the ghastly little minx, but soon they worked out a way to get back at her. "Let's make her stay," said Hermione, "for more than a week." Gertrude clapped her hands with pleasure. "Oh, yes," she said, smiling. "That will make the Beast so angry that it might kill her." Hermione spat viciously. "But what can we do? How can we do it?" asked Gertrude. "Let's pretend we're pleased to see her," said Hermione. "She won't be able to resist." From that moment on, Beauty's sisters treated her with such a show of love and kindness that she was quite overwhelmed. They brought her tea in bed, they laughed at all her jokes, and then they scowled behind her back. Let me put on like this. Mr. Fortune was quite recovered as well, and Beauty was so happy that she knew it would be hard to leave, though she did miss the Beast a great deal. On the morning she was meant to go, however, Hermione and Gertrude burst into tears and wept uncontrollably, pleading with Beauty to stay and think of them and their poor dear father. Little did Beauty know that they had rubbed their eyes with onions to make themselves cry, but it was so convincing that Beauty, moved their tears, agreed to stay a day longer. Each morning Beauty's sisters rubbed their eyes with onions until the false tears came, and each night they wept with laughter at the success of their plan, and every day Beauty agreed to stay a little bit longer, though she worried more and more about her promise to the Beast and was troubled by a strange sadness whenever she thought of him. It was on her 10th night at home that Beauty finally understood what she had done. In the mirror, as she brushed her hair before bed, her reflection disappeared, and she saw instead, as if from a great height, the Beast's palace bathed in pale moonlight. And then suddenly there was the Beast himself, lying beside the river in a part of the garden Beauty had never seen. He looked ill and wretched, and his eyes were full of a hopeless agony that Beauty knew was all her fault. All right, we're going to stop here and then continue, get yourself a little break, and then we'll continue with the ending in a little bit.